In the early 2000s, Robert Greene once described a meeting with a powerful entertainment executive during his years studying human behavior and influence. The executive wanted something from a negotiation, and the other man arrived fully prepared, armed with arguments, leverage, and rehearsed persuasion, but the executive barely spoke. He did not argue. He did not interrupt. He simply observed in silence. And slowly, the other man began talking faster, filling every pause, offering explanations no one had requested, even giving away concessions before pressure was applied. By the end of the meeting, he had surrendered more than he intended, while the executive had barely moved a muscle. Robert Greene later reflected on encounters like these as moments that revealed the true nature of power. Not dominance, not aggression, but the terrifying influence of someone who does not need to force anything. There is a force more persuasive than any argument, more seductive than any charm, and more devastating than any threat. And most people spend their entire lives doing the exact opposite of it every single day. I am going to show you 5 psychological mechanisms that make a person magnetically powerful. But the 5th one, the one that ties them all together, is the one nobody talks about. And it will completely rewire how you see relationships, negotiations, attraction, and power itself. Point 1. The architecture of want. Why desire inverts power. Here is a law that governs every human interaction, and yet almost no one obeys it. The person who wants less controls more. Not the person who has more money, not the person with the better argument, not even the person with higher status. The person who can sit at the table and genuinely not need the outcome, that person bends gravity. Robert Cialdini documented this through his research on scarcity. He found that the perceived value of anything, a product, a person, an opportunity, increases the moment it becomes harder to obtain. But here is the part most people miss. Scarcity doesn't just apply to objects. It applies to you. Your attention, your approval, your emotional availability. When you chase someone, when you text first every time, when you over-explain your worth, when you ask, "Are we okay?" after every disagreement, you are flooding the market with yourself. You are making your presence cheap, and cheap things get discarded. Think about this. In the courts of Renaissance Italy, the advisors who survived were not the most talented. They were the ones who understood proximity as currency. They didn't crowd the prince. They positioned themselves at a distance that made the prince come to them. They understood that a man who is always available is a man who is never valued. There was a courtier in the court of Ludovicosa, a skilled musician, a decent strategist who made one fatal error. He was always there. Every feast, every council, every hunt, he volunteered for every task. He praised every decision, and within 2 years, Schwarzer couldn't remember his name. He had become furniture. Meanwhile, another man, far less talented, appeared only when summoned, spoke only when the room was stuck, left before anyone wanted him to. Schwarzer grew obsessed with him, started consulting him privately, gave him land. The difference was not skill, it was dosage. You become irreplaceable not by doing more, but by making what you do feel rare. And this applies everywhere. In romance, the partner who pulls back slightly after giving warmth creates an almost narcotic craving in the other. Not through manipulation, but through natural rhythm. Tension, release tension, the heartbeat of all attraction. In business, the consultant who says, "I'm not sure I'm the right fit for this," will be hired faster than the one who sends 14 follow-up emails because the first one has communicated something primal. "I don't need you." And that sentence, unspoken, implied, is the most attractive thing a human being can project. Mark Manson calls this non-neediness. He argues it is the single most important trait in any social dynamic. Not confidence, not charisma, non-neediness, because confidence can be faked. Charisma can be performed, but the absence of desperation that cannot be imitated for long. It radiates from a place that is either full or empty, and people can feel the difference. So here is the brutal question. What are you begging for right now? Whose approval have you been chasing so hard that you have forgotten what it feels like to stand on your own ground, because that chase, that invisible leaning forward, it is the very thing pushing away what you want. Stop reaching and watch what reaches back. Point 2. The Borgia Principle. Power through deliberate incompleteness. There is a reason unfinished paintings sell for more at auction than completed ones. There is a reason a song that cuts off before the final chorus haunts you longer than one that resolves. There is a reason a half smile is more unsettling and more memorable than a full grin. The human brain is wired to complete patterns. When something is left open, unresolved, partially revealed, your mind cannot let it go. It chews on it, returns to it, obsesses. Psychologists call this the Zeigarnik effect. But Robert Greene understood it long before most people ever paid attention to it. Borgia never revealed his full plan to anyone. Not his generals, not his father, not even his closest advisor. He gave each person one piece, enough to act on, never enough to see the whole board. And this did something extraordinary. It made every person around him feel that they were close to understanding him, but never quite there. That gap, the space between what people know about you and what they suspect, is where your power lives. Most people do the opposite. They overshare. They narrate their every move. They explain their reasoning before anyone asks. They think that transparency builds trust. And in some contexts it does. But in the dynamics of power and attraction, transparency is surrender. When you tell someone everything about your plans, your feelings, your fears, you have handed them a map of your interior. They know where your treasure is buried. They know where your walls are thin. And whether they use that information against you or not, you have eliminated the one thing that made you compelling, the unknown. Robert Greene writes about this in The Art of Seduction. He argues that mystery is the foundation of all attraction. Not beauty, not wealth, not intellect, mystery. Because beauty fades. Wealth can be matched. Intellect can be debated. But a person who cannot be fully read, fully categorized, fully understood, that person occupies a permanent space in the minds of others. Think about the people who have fascinated you most in your life. Were they the ones who told you everything on the first meeting? Or were they the ones who left you with questions? Who said something that didn't quite add up? Who smiled at the wrong time or stayed quiet when everyone expected them to speak? You were drawn to the gap. Here is where most people fail. They confuse mystery with dishonesty. Mystery is not lying. It is editing. It is the discipline of deciding what to reveal and when. It is the art of leaving the last page of your chapter unwritten so that the reader has no choice but to keep turning. A man who tells you he is powerful is forgettable. A man who says nothing and yet commands the room. He is etched into your memory because your brain has been given a problem it cannot solve. And unsolved problems create obsession, practical application. The next time someone asks you what you have been working on, do not give them the full answer. Give them a fragment, a tone, a direction without a destination. Something that's been keeping me up at night. I'll tell you when it's ready. That sentence does more than a 10-minute explanation ever could. It creates investment. It creates curiosity. It creates a reason to come back to you. You are not hiding. You are curating, and curation is the language of the powerful. Point 3. The posture of kings. Why begging is biological suicide. In the animal kingdom, there is a phenomenon called appeasement signaling. When a weaker animal encounters a dominant one, it drops its body, lowers its head, exposes its belly. It is saying without words, I am not a threat. Please don't destroy me. Humans do the same thing, except we do it with words. I'm sorry to bother you. I know you're busy, but I totally understand if you can't. Just checking in again. Every one of those sentences is a belly-up display. Every one is a signal that says, you are above me and I am hoping you will be kind enough to descend. And here is what's devastating. It works. In the short term, people will throw you scraps when you gravel. They will respond to your 5th follow-up. They will give you a fraction of what you asked for just to make you stop. But they will never respect you. And they will never see you as an equal. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher, was born a slave. He had no wealth, no title, no social leverage, and yet the most powerful men in Rome sought his counsel. Why? Because he never asked them for anything. He never positioned himself below anyone, not out of arrogance, out of self-sufficiency. His posture, even as a former slave, communicated, "I have everything I need inside this mind. You may join me or you may leave. I will not adjust my orbit for you." That posture, that complete, terrifying self-containment was more powerful than any senator's fortune. Robert Greene observed this in the powerful figures. He studied versus the ones who collapsed under pressure, the people who begged for alliances, who sent desperate letters, who offered concessions before they were asked. They were the first to be conquered. Because begging communicates one thing above all else: I cannot survive without you. And the moment someone knows you cannot survive without them, they own you. There is a story about a Venetian merchant in the 15th century who was negotiating a trade route with the Ottoman Empire. He wanted the deal badly. His entire fortune depended on it. But instead of rushing to Constantinople, he sent a brief message. "I will be passing through your waters next spring. If a meeting would serve your interests, I am open to a conversation." He did not ask. He did not plead. He did not even confirm he wanted the deal. He framed his presence as the opportunity, not the other way around. The Ottomans agreed to meet within a week. Contrast this with another merchant, wealthier, better connected, who had sent 3 delegations in the previous year, each one more desperate than the last, each one offering more favorable terms. The Ottomans ignored all 3, not because the deal was bad, but because desperation has a smell, and it signals that you are the one who needs saving. When you beg, you are not just asking for something. You are broadcasting your own insufficiency. You are telling the world, "I am incomplete without this." And the world, being what it is, will respond by withholding the very thing you crave. This is not cruelty. This is physics. Desperation repels. Self-sufficiency attracts. The gravitational pull of a person who does not need is almost impossible to resist. So the question becomes, how do you stop begging when you genuinely need something? You reframe the internal architecture. You do not need their approval. You prefer it. You do not need the job. You are evaluating whether it deserves your years. You do not need the relationship. You are choosing whether this person earns access to your life. The shift is subtle, but the effect is seismic. Because when you stop needing, you stop leaking power. And when you stop leaking power, people start noticing a gravity about you that they cannot explain. They will call it confidence. They will call it charisma. But it is simpler than that. It is the posture of a person who has stopped asking the world for permission to exist. Point 4, the doctrine of calculated friction. Why making it easy makes you disposable. There is a psychological experiment most people have never heard of. In 1959, 2 researchers, Elliot Aronson and Judson Mills, tested something counterintuitive. They took a group of volunteers and divided them into 2 paths to join the same group. One path was easy. Fill out a form, show up, you're in. The other path was brutal, embarrassing tasks, difficult screening, rejection at every stage. The result? The people who suffered to get in valued the group significantly more than those who walked in for free. Same group, same experience, same people inside. But the ones who bled for entry treated it like sacred ground. This is called the effort justification effect, and it governs far more of your life than you realize. When you make yourself easy to access, when you answer every call on the first ring, when you say yes before they finish asking, when you rearrange your entire schedule to accommodate someone who wouldn't rearrange a single hour for you, you are stripping away the friction that creates value. You are making yourself free, and free things are treated like free things, discarded, forgotten, replaced without guilt. Robert Greene saw this principle play out repeatedly in the political structures and courts he studied throughout history. The rulers who granted audiences freely, who opened their doors to every petitioner, who made themselves perpetually available, they were the ones who lost control of their courts. Because when access is unlimited, access becomes worthless. But the rulers who required something, a weight, a favor, a demonstration of loyalty before the meeting was granted, those rulers held courts that ran on reverence. not because they were better leaders, but because they understood that human beings do not value what comes without cost. This applies to your relationships with surgical precision. Think about the friend who always picks up, who always has time, who never says no. You love that friend. But do you respect them the way you respect the person who is harder to reach? The one whose time feels scarce? The one who, when they finally sit down with you, makes it feel like an event? Be honest with yourself. There is a man I once read about, a tailor in Milan during the 16th century. He was not the best tailor. There were at least 3 others with finer stitching, but he had a waiting list that stretched 6 months. Why? Because he refused to rush. He turned away clients who demanded speed. He told a duke that his order would have to wait behind a merchant's because the merchant had been patient. Word spread. Not about his skill, about his standards. And suddenly, every nobleman in Lombardy wanted to wear his work. Not because the fabric was better, because being dressed by him meant you had earned it. The friction was the product. You must engineer friction into your own life. Not artificially, not through games, but through genuine standards. Stop being perpetually available. Not to play hard to get, but because your time genuinely costs something, and you should treat it that way. Stop agreeing to every invitation, not to seem important, but because saying no to the wrong things is the only way to say yes to the right ones. When someone asks for your time, your help, your energy, they should feel the weight of what they are requesting. Not because you make it difficult, but because you have made your life so purposeful that diverting from it carries real cost. This is not arrogance. This is architecture. The person who gives freely is generous, but the person who gives selectively is powerful. And the difference between them is not kindness. It is intentionality. Cialdini's scarcity principle confirms this at every level. Limited editions sell out. Exclusive clubs thrive. Restaurants with 2-month waiting lists get reviewed by every food critic in the country. The mechanism is identical. Friction signals value. Ease signals disposability. Your attention is the most valuable resource you own. More valuable than money because money can be earned back. An hour of genuine focused attention from a person of substance. That is irreplaceable. Start treating it that way. When you do, something strange happens. People stop expecting you. They start appreciating you. The dynamic inverts. You are no longer the one pursuing. You are the one being pursued. And pursuit, once it reverses, almost never reverses back. Point 5. The 5th mechanism. The one that changes everything. This is the part I told you about at the beginning. The mechanism that binds the other 4 together and makes them work. Without it, everything I've said is technique, performance, a costume that falls apart the first time someone tugs at the seam. Here it is. You must become the person who does not perform power but possesses it internally. And that possession comes from one source that almost nobody discusses. Self-betrayal. Not the absence of it. The reckoning with it. Every time you said yes when your gut screamed no. Every time you laughed at a joke that demeaned you. Every time you stayed in a room, a relationship, a job, a friendship that was slowly hollowing you out because leaving felt harder than shrinking. Every time you abandoned your own standards to keep someone else comfortable, those moments did not just cost you peace, they cost you presence. They fractured something at the core of your identity, the quiet internal knowledge that you can trust yourself. And without that self-trust, every technique becomes desperation wearing a better suit. You can practice scarcity, but if deep down you believe you are not worth the wait, your body will betray you. Your eyes will dart. Your voice will waver. You will over-explain the pause you created, and the whole architecture collapses. You can practice mystery, but if you are hiding not from strategy, but from shame, because you genuinely believe that if they saw the real you, they would leave, then the mystery is not power. It is a prison. You can refuse to beg, but if the refusal is held together by white knuckles and a clenched jaw, people will sense the strain. And strain is just begging with better posture. Robert Greene often speaks about powerful historical figures who lost everything before rebuilding themselves from the inside out. The lesson was never about tactics alone. It was about identity. The people who survived humiliation, exile, rejection, and collapse were the ones who stopped performing strength and started becoming structurally strong. This is what Epictetus meant when he said, "No man is free who is not master of himself, not master of others, not master of perception, master of himself." The man who is reconciled with his own shadows, who has stopped running from his own disappointments, who has looked at his history of self-betrayal and said, "That ends now." That man does not need to perform anything. The room adjusts to him, not because he demands it, because authenticity at that depth creates a gravitational field that artifice cannot replicate. There is a concept in the laws of human nature that Robert Greene calls the law of compulsive behavior. He argues that people are driven by deep patterns, often invisible to themselves, that repeat across every domain of their life. The man who begs in relationships will beg in business. The woman who abandons herself for approval at work will abandon herself for approval at home. The pattern is the person, and until you confront the pattern, no strategy will save you. So here is the uncomfortable work. You must audit your betrayals, not the betrayals others committed against you. Those are easy to catalogue. The ones you committed against yourself. The times you knew you should have walked away, but stayed. The moments you dimmed yourself so someone else could feel bright. The promises you made to your own soul and broke before breakfast. Write them down if you have to. Not to punish yourself, but to see the pattern, because once you see it, you can interrupt it. And once you interrupt it, you stop leaking the quiet signal that tells the world, this person does not fully believe in their own worth. That signal, invisible, unspoken, radiating from every pore, is the reason techniques fail for most people. They are broadcasting unworthiness underneath a performance of strength. And human beings, at a subconscious level, can always detect the frequency beneath the words. When you stop betraying yourself, when you start honoring your own standards, even when it costs you, something shifts that cannot be explained through psychology alone. It is almost alchemical. Your voice changes, not louder, heavier. Your eyes settle, not cold, certain. Your presence fills a room differently, not aggressively, inevitably. People will start describing you in ways that confuse you. There's something about him. He's different now. I can't explain it, but I trust him. They are not responding to what you are doing. They are responding to what you have stopped doing. You have stopped apologizing for existing. You have stopped performing a version of yourself designed for someone else's comfort. You have stopped negotiating with your own boundaries. And in that cessation, that refusal to bend any further, you become the thing that everyone is drawn to and almost no one can name. You become whole, not perfect, not invulnerable, not cold, whole. A person whose inside matches their outside. A person who does not need the room to validate what they already know about themselves. That is the fifth mechanism. And it is the only one that matters, because without it you are performing mystery. With it you are mystery. Robert Greene did not build his understanding of power by rehearsing tricks in front of a mirror. He spent years observing celebrities, politicians, seducers, war strategists, and ruthless social climbers from a distance. He noticed something strange. The people who held the most influence were rarely the loudest in the room. They were the ones who had already decided at the deepest level that they did not need anyone's approval. They spoke less, revealed less, and moved with a kind of internal certainty that made other people lean toward them automatically. That is the difference between tactic and identity. Tactics are borrowed. Identity is built, and once built, it does not require maintenance. It simply is. You now have the architecture, the scarcity that comes from genuine fullness, not manufactured absence. The mystery that comes from depth, not deception. The posture that comes from self-respect, not ego. The friction that comes from real standards, not games. And the foundation, the brutal, quiet work of ending your war with yourself. But knowing the architecture and living inside it are two different things. And here is the thought I will leave you with. The version of you that stops begging, that stops chasing, that stops performing, That version already exists. You have felt him in flashes, in those rare moments when you said no and meant it. When you walked away from something comfortable because it was slowly killing you. When you sat in silence and realized that the silence was not emptiness, it was sufficiency. He is not someone you need to build. He is someone you need to stop burying. And the question that will haunt you tonight if you let it is this: what are you still performing, and for whose applause? If this cuts somewhere deep, understand this is only what I'm allowed to show. There are layers of this I cannot put on YouTube. Strategies and psychological frameworks that cross lines the algorithm punishes. The information that actually shifts how people treat you. It doesn't survive in public. Subscribe if you haven't. Most people will scroll past. That's the filter working exactly as it should.